Most people are taught to remember the American Revolution as a moral awakening, a story of ideals, of liberty asserted against tyranny, of slogans, pamphlets, and philosophical courage. But history rarely moves because of words alone. If you look beneath the speeches and symbols, beneath the patriotic mythology that hardened later, a quieter force is at work, one that textbooks tend to soften or ignore. The financial relationship between Britain and its American colonies had stopped functioning, and when the financial logic of an empire breaks down, the political structure soon follows. The American colonies did not rebel simply because they wanted freedom. They rebelled because the economic system binding them to Britain became unsustainable. To understand why, we have to step back not to 1776, but decades earlier. Britain emerged from the 7 Years' War victorious, but financially exhausted. The war had expanded the empire, secured territory, and defeated rivals, but it also hollowed out the British treasury, national debt soared, interest payments consumed government revenue, and London faced a problem every imperial power eventually confronts. How do you pay for an empire once expansion stops paying for itself? The answer seemed obvious to Parliament. If the colonies were expensive to defend, then the colonies should help pay for their defence. From London's perspective, this wasn't oppression. It was accounting. Taxes that had once been light or inconsistently enforced multiplied. Duties rose, regulations tightened, trade oversight hardened. To British officials, the colonies were assets within a larger balance sheet. To the colonists, something else was happening. They were being asked to fund an empire that denied them access to the very financial systems that made growth possible. The structure governing this relationship was mercantilism, a system designed to extract wealth upward, from colony to metropole. American merchants could sell primarily to Britain, at British prices, on British ships. Imports flowed through British channels. Even when the colonies prospered, the surplus moved across the Atlantic. And when Britain needed revenue, the colonies became a source with no political resistance built into the system. But the most destabilizing pressure was not taxation. It was control over money itself. The Currency Acts of 1751 and 1764 are rarely discussed outside academic circles. Yet they were among the most economically destructive policies Britain imposed. The colonies were restricted, then effectively barred from issuing their own paper money. Without local currency, credit contracted, debts became harder to service. Trade slowed, economic activity suffocated. In modern terms, this was deflation, a shortage of money causing contraction. But for those living through it, it felt like being trapped in an economy without oxygen. You could work, but you could not circulate value freely. Small farmers struggled to pay debts denominated in sterling. Merchants found themselves unable to settle accounts. Even the colonial elite men later remembered as revolutionaries were financially exposed. Large planters and landowners. Their obligations were fixed in pounds, while their incomes fluctuated. As tobacco prices fell and currency restrictions tightened, their balance sheets deteriorated. This does not mean the founders were cynical. When Britain taxed, the colonies resisted. But when Britain restricted money itself, the system began to fracture. And when pressure is felt simultaneously by farmers, merchants, and elites, cohesion forms quickly. Still, outrage alone does not produce independence. Supply chains require credit. The American Revolution succeeded not because the colonies were wealthy or well-equipped, but because Britain's rivals recognized an opportunity. France moved first. Instead, French officials created a commercial front Rodrigue, Hartolles and Co. The man coordinating this effort was Pierre Beaumarchais, best remembered today as a playwright. France was weakening Britain without declaring war. Dutch bankers treated the rebellion as a speculative instrument, high risk, potentially high reward. To them, American independence was not a political cause. Inside the colonies, a parallel network emerged. Robert Morris personally underwrote military operations when Congress could not. Haynes Salomon converted foreign loans into usable cash and credit, keeping the army solvent when collapse seemed inevitable. These figures rarely appear in patriotic imagery, but without them, the revolution ends quietly unfunded and unresolved. What began as resistance became a viable geopolitical project. Debt creates leverage. They expected influence, access, and advantage once Britain was weakened. Congress printed paper money. Soldiers were paid in currency that depreciated faster than they could spend it. A speculative class emerged buying government debt at deep discounts, betting the new nation would eventually honor its obligations. When it did, fortunes were made. It created a creditor class. America entered the world not as a free agent, but as a debtor state, its domestic structure shaped by the demands of credibility. The famous divide between Jefferson and Hamilton was not only philosophical. Hamilton understood what foreign creditors required. Decentralization inspires ideals. The assumption of state debts, the creation of a national bank, and federal taxation were not abstract theories. They were responses to financial obligation. Even resistance followed familiar patterns. When those taxes reached frontier farmers, rebellion followed. It was a reminder that independence does not eliminate financial pressure, it redirects it. When France later demanded military support, America declined. It relied too heavily on trade and credit. By the time the dust settled, the revolution had evolved into something quieter but more enduring. The colonies broke from Britain politically but integrated into European capital markets economically. But they rested on foundations built from loans, bonds, leverage, and rivalry. It is a structural observation. It was funded into existence. When rivals exploit opportunity, the American Revolution was not just a war of independence. And once you see that, history stops looking random